the country will go bankrupt.
Kita akan menghadapi krisis ekonomi tahun depan.
Kedudukan keuangan negara kita adalah amat begitu meruncing.
單止警察局，賣身仲係破產局啊！我哋一步一步衝緊落去一個破產嘅國家。
Hi, I am Amir Asri. We were shocked to know that our national debt was at a huge amount of number.
According to Business Dictionary, bankruptcy is a legal procedure for liquidating a business or property owned by an individual which cannot fully pay its debt. Bankruptcy can be brought upon itself by an insolvent debtor. Bankruptcy in a state perspective can be defined when a country can no longer pay the interest on its debt or convince anyone to lend it money. It has reached bankruptcy. Government take on debt when they need to spend more money than they have. Of course, it's safer to only spend what you have, but in many situations, the extra spending can bring benefits that outweigh the cost of the debt. It is like how you might take up a loan to finance a college education, toasting that the education will lead to a higher salary. Government do the same. They invest in infrastructure or other development projects that boost the country economy, then generate more revenue, which government use to repay its debt. And no, the government doesn't apply for a loan at a bank. Government make their own debts by issuing bonds and securities which are bought by any parties who have the money. These would be financial institutions, corporates, individual or other countries who then earn interest on the money they lend. If a country take on too much debt, it impacts the country's future development. Taxes and income will go into repaying the debts and not be used for productive development. In the worst case scenario, if a country default on its debts, they may have to devalue their currency debt more affordable, sometimes with disastrous results.
Since that crisis, Argentina's been wrestling with finding a solution for restructuring its debt and paying off creditors.
The people are out on the streets again as their country desperately struggles to repay more than it owes by July.
Based on the Straits Times newspaper, this dreadful debt revelation is a most welcome tribute to transparency and accountability and show a definite move toward greater integrity and the adoption of good governance in New Malaysia. The Sun Daily newspaper says Prime Minister Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad, Finance Minister Lim Guan Eng and the new cabinet must be congratulated for revealing officially and publicly that our national debt is at dreadfully high. Next, let's hear what the public opinion says.
Pendapat saya tentang hutang negara ni pada saya amat membimbangkan lah, sebab apa yang kita tahu, hutang negara kita dah capai lebih kurang dalam 1 trilion ringgit macam tu. So kalau kita tak selesaikan hutang ni dalam masa terdekat, mungkin negara kita akan terdedah pada risiko di mana negara kita akan tergadai lah pada negara luar untuk menyelesaikan hutang ni. So ekonomi negara kita pun mungkin akan terjejas.
Bagi saya sekarang ni hutang negara okey saja pada yang tahap yang kita sebenarnya tak perlu risaulah, sebab kerajaan kita ni dia bukan pada tahap yang merisaukan, tapi dia ada sikit merosot berbanding dengan kerajaan sebelumnya.
So, based on the public that we had interviewed, we can assume public is not really clear about the current situation of our debt. Next, let's hear what experts says.
There's no way the statistic provided by the World Bank, IMF, our nation is going to be a bankrupt nation. No way. But how do you convince it to the ordinary people? How do you convince it to the layman? So you need to explain it in the terms that they really understand, in the ordinary terms, not economic terms, or not using the high bombastic term, but something that we can really understand, comprehend, that they can relate it to their everyday life. Now that's very critical, so that they can really feel it. No, our nation is not going to bankrupt. In fact, our nation will be in a better off position this year, next year, or until 2020. If we are going to be a bankrupt nation, cash is very hard to come by.
It's a relatively high level, and further increase in the debt level will put Malaysia as well as the government into a risky position of not being able to face future crises.
I think it all depends on how you calculate the debt, whether you want to include contingent liabilities and government guarantees in your calculation. Direct debt is about just over 50%. But when you include the guarantees and the other contingent liabilities, it can go up to 80+%, right? So the disagreement is on whether you want to include the guarantees and the contingent liabilities as well.
Malaysian government debt has been increasing since the year 1997 when the ASEAN financial crisis occurred. From the year 2018 onwards, our country's current debt level is still far from optimistic level, and the condition is really getting serious. How much exactly is our debt? Based on the Age Market newspaper, Malaysian government debt has grown an average of 10% a year over the past 10 years to reach 687.43 billion ringgit at the end of September 2017.
Dahulu kalau kita ada hutang jumlahnya tidak lebih daripada 300 bilion ringgit, tetapi sekarang sudah meningkat lebih daripada 1 trilion ringgit.
Next, let me see on how government calculated the 1 trillion ringgit. Based on Malaysian debt cloud, what is the current debt to gross domestic product figures? 739 billion and 775 million and 658,000 ringgit. Note, this figure excludes newly found government guarantee of 199 billion ringgit and public-private partnership lease payment of 201 billion ringgit. This is central government debts, but the data is questionable. Let's hear how our finance minister calculated the debt.
Number one, the official federal government debt is 686.8 billion ringgit, which constitutes 50.8% of the GDP. Two, in addition, the government is already committed to pay for government guarantees for various entities who are unable to service their debts. This amounts to 199.1 billion ringgit, or 14.6% of GDP. The committed government guarantees would include entities such as Dana Infra Nasional Berhad, 42.2 billion ringgit, Gulfco Holdings Berhad, 8.8 billion ringgit, Prasarana Malaysia Berhad, 26.6 billion ringgit, Malaysia Rail Link Sdn Berhad, 14.5 billion ringgit, as well as an estimated 38 billion ringgit for 1 MDB. Based on the two items above, the debt would amount to 885.9 billion ringgit. Thirdly, in addition to the above, the federal government has also been committed and obligated to make lease payments, which includes rental, maintenance, and other charges, for a whole list of so-called public-private partnership projects, such as the construction of schools, hostels, roads, police stations, and hospitals. The lease commitments which were designed specifically to circumvent the federal government guarantees and debt limits amounts to 201.4 billion ringgit, or 14.9% of GDP. Hence, the federal government debt and liabilities would amount to a total of 1,087.3 billion ringgit, or 80.3% of the GDP as at 31st December 2017.
This is the illustration of 1 trillion ringgit debts, same as the airport runway. Why were guarantee and so-called public-private partnership is included in government debt?
Because many of these contracts, when you have these guarantees, and you know the other side has no capacity to pay, you definitely at the end of the day is the government paying. And these are actually recognized debt. That's where our PPP comes in. So many people question our PPP, how can it be considered a government debt, a federal government debt? But you know the other side has no capacity to pay, just like one NDB. You give a letter of comfort and you say, oh, we won't recognize it because you use cash receipts. But now we are moving to accrual. That's why they are delaying accrual. Accrual will be a more accurate reflection of your financial position. But when you know the other party is basically bankrupt, just one NDB, they are insolvent, they got no assets, 950 million US of so-called units or investment, non-existent. So when you are in this sort of situation, I think you should recognize it as a debt. Because you're going to pay for it until the one NDB 2039. 38 billion still to be paid. And why is there a difference between, for example, Najib's figures and Tun An's figures? No, for example, I just give an example of HSR. He mentions 72B, but he doesn't include the interest cost. If we include interest cost, it could be easily over, Mahathir said 110, I think it's a little bit conservative, it could be higher. So I think this is where we need to pare it down. Really need to pare it down. Or else, I think we are mortgaging the future of our children. And this is a responsibility that we cannot gamble.
How are we going to manage this situation? What government had done in order to reduce national debt that lead to bankruptcy? First, renegotiate mega project. Example of mega projects such as East Coast Rail Link. The government decided to go back to the negotiation table on the East Coast Rail Link ECRL project because its termination would cost 21.78 billion ringgit with nothing to show for it, says Prime Minister Tun Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. He said in renegotiating the project, the government called for a more equitable deal where the need of Malaysians would be prioritized.
And I think what has happened also in the last maybe 10 years, we have been also going into a lot of projects supposedly done by private sector, but guaranteed by government. We may need to slow down with some of our unnecessary or not priority projects at the moment. Alright, so in the case of ECRL, I think we couldn't pull out, or if you pull out, you have to pay a fine, right? Because you've already signed the contract, right? So instead of scrapping the project, we renegotiated. Okay, so from 66 billion, it is now about 44 billion, right? So it reduced the project cost. So all Malaysians have to make sure that they contribute to the country, pay your taxes, so get your revenue up, get your costs down as much as possible.
Second, impose new tax.
Now it was suggested that we should have new taxes. I don't think that is something that is welcome by the people. But we may have to devise new taxes in order to have the money to pay our debts.
Third, sell more government assets.
Identifying assets of the government which we can sell, some assets. In fact, if necessary, sell even land belonging to the government, because of course we will sell the land to Malaysians and not to foreigners, and I think that will have reduced the borrowings.
Why don't we print our money for fun?
Normally, government's most stable source of funding is actually domestic sources, largely because they are so-called domestic currency. Government has the ability to print unlimited amount of money. So technically, governments cannot default on its own currency. Problem here is, of course, with printing of more money, you lead to a depreciation of currency, and then in the end, you will lead to hyperinflation, and that will destroy the economy. I think we don't have much quibble over the allocation of the funding in terms of the type of development projects, because these projects are all into education, health, infrastructure. So all these development projects are aimed at uplifting the standard of living of the people.
By looking at the solutions just now, do you think the government be able to pay the huge amount of debt that we are facing now in 1 to 2 years as to prevent bankruptcy?
It's a big question for you to answer.